Hare Krishna. Well, it's nice to be back. It's been a very long time. Um, I don't know why. I just wanted to finish this series of 50 years in ISKCON that I started a very long time ago. And it's just not like me to not finish something. So I've got a couple of more talks that I really wanted to do. Um, I wanted to kind of finish it off, um, finish the series with some reflections, because I started in the beginning when I joined and till now. And some reflections on my journey, where I began and where it's led me to now. And also to do the same in reflections around the evolution of the institution. So let me just say a prayer to get through this. I haven't done it for a long time. So need some blessings from the Lord. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Samaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vaskachade Satarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sinubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Excuse me. Before I start on those reflections, I just wanted to mention one final significant life event that took place recently, and that's the marriage of our daughter, Rasrani Priya. Just checking I've got everything set up. Well, I think for most parents, it's a big deal when the kids leave home. It's a milestone event that it often changes your life, physically, emotionally, even spiritually. And, we were very fortunate to have her, our only child, living with us all these years. And although she traveled a lot, but she's just been such a unique and wonderful person, to be with, and such a great help to us, especially since my husband's illness. So it's a big change. And not only is she leaving home, but she's taking with her the beautiful Radhamadava deities and Srila Prabhupada deity that have been the center of our household for decades, so talk about empty nest syndrome. But, so naturally there was some anxiety on my part, anticipating all this change and the whole wedding. And, it was all a new learning experience for me, surely, at, an elderly age. But, the wedding events, I have to say, were truly wonderful and uplifting. And I was really touched to see the, emotional openness of the bride and groom, and just the very generous and affectionate support of so many friends, family, even guru, who, spontaneously just came forward to make the events, deeply moving and meaningful. And I just found it very encouraging to see the strong bonds of affection that exist between these younger generations, many who have grown up together. And I just think it's a very good sign for the future. But for me, it felt like a defining juncture in my life, which left me feeling, old and uncertain, part of my life that's over. Of course, a mother is always a mother, but there's a feeling of loss or emptiness, and just a stark awareness that we can't hold on to anything. And we know that, but certain life events really force us to actually realize that all things must pass. And that is certainly the only thing we can truly count on in this world, that change is inevitable. And we know the philosophy, but applying it and living it through all these changes and different stages of life, well, that's the challenge. So it's the challenge, but it's how a devotee's life, how our lives differ so greatly from others, really. We may look like we're just going through all those same mundane events of life, but internally we have a totally different lens in which to view and experience everything. So every event is an opportunity, to go deeper in spiritual life. There are no meaningless experiences. So anyway, now I have finished sharing some of my experiences during the last 50, actually it's more like 56 years now. And it's such an historic time, and it still is. This unfolding of Mahaprabhu's predictions and establishing an international Vaishnava society for the first time in history, really. So I hope I've conveyed something that's useful about these unique times. There's nothing particularly special about my story. It's just one of thousands. And, but everyone who's taken part in unfolding this mission has a story. And, some of them may be quite different from mine, and some probably more exciting or enlightening or sad or blissful, or every journey is unique, whether it's the first or second or third generations. We are all a part of a very special time in history when Krishna consciousness is being spread throughout the world. So in that sense, every story, big or small, it is significant. And, that's why I decided to do this series. And I hope many more devotees will preserve their experiences in some way before we'll all leave this world. Because I think people in the future, they will want to know. They will want to know. So, now at the end of it, I'm not dead yet, but one might ask, the question, well, how do you feel personally from, where you began to where you are now after so many years? Did you reach the state of spiritual awakening you expected as a young girl? Are you happy? Do you have regrets or disappointments? And so I'd like to answer that. But to answer it to begin with, I just first say that I think it's miraculous that I'm still here and still practicing, trying to practice, because I've seen over the decades so many come and go. So I'm just immensely grateful to still be on the path. And I admit, I have not risen to a level that I might have hoped for as a young girl, maybe naively. And I admit that, sometimes I feel disappointed that I don't have more taste or more profound realizations, or, just wish I was a better disciple, or I'd done more to assist in the mission. Yeah, we can lament in that way, but despite some disappointment, I don't feel at all discouraged, because each of us, we just have to do our best day after day, and we keep trying, and that in and of itself it's a kind of success. So I have learned to temper my expectations with the understanding that what we're trying to do, to become Vaishnavas, to try to stop the cycle of repeated birth and death, that is not at all an easy thing. In fact, there's probably nothing more difficult. And becoming a true Vaishnava, it's the highest pinnacle of human expression. And so of course it's just not going to be quick and easy. It takes tremendous effort and sincerity and determination. And it's just not as simple as joining the organization and putting on tilak. And the older I get, the more I realize how much it really entails to really become a Vaishnav. There's many different lists and descriptions of what a Vaishnava looks like. I copied one of them. Let me see. I'll read. I don't know. I don't remember where it's from, but there's many different lists of, what is a devotee, what is a Vaishnava, and here's one. It says, they are always merciful, humble, truthful, equal to all, tolerant, peaceful, steady in service, surrendered to Krishna, always working for the welfare of all beings without expecting personal gain, free from material desires and negative emotions like lust, anger, and pride, friendly, broad-minded, they never waste time, they have love for all living entities, and more. That's not all. That's just one list, and I was like, wow. To actually become a Vaishnav, we aspire to become like this, but I certainly have a long way to go to have all those qualities. Hearing this, some maybe younger people, well, anyone might just find this disappointing. Really? After half a century, more than half a century, this is how you feel? Not even a Vaishnava? Where is the prema? So I'm sorry to disappoint, but I admit, prema has not arrived. Yet what I do know, and what gives me a deep sense of satisfaction and anticipation, is that without a doubt, I am on that path. And if I stay on it, I will become a true Vaishnava, and prema will come. Now, this explanation might not satisfy everyone. I have heard quite a few devotees express disappointment that they don't see many older devotees, exhibiting higher levels of practice, or higher levels of bhakti, rather, after decades. Why aren't they more advanced? And does it even work? This process. I've heard these questions. I understand. And I do see many devotees who have become extremely advanced, but it is also true that many of us lag behind But again, I have to say, it's not surprising or discouraging to me. A few decades of practice, it's just nothing. It's so small. One lifetime, it's just a blip. Consider that we have been living for sense gratification, inimical to the Lord, for millions of births. That kind of habitual behavior, that's not going to change overnight. Although, Prabhupada said it's possible, but generally not. Because Bhagavad Gita tells us that out of millions of people, only a few are even going to try to make their life successful. And out of those, maybe one will understand Krishna. And, what to speak of attaining prema, the highest, most precious, exalted expression of love. It is very rare. So the point I'm making is that, maybe we need to cut each other a little slack and lower our expectations a bit and just, appreciate the efforts. We are trying to do something extraordinary, rare, difficult. We're shooting for the rhino. The fact that, we're even trying it's special, So, that's not meant to be a rationalization for, not making significant progress, or, an excuse for complacency. It's just to say that throughout a whole lifetime of practice, we'll be challenged. And if we want to keep moving forward on the path of bhakti, we have to remain always vigilant and committed and regularly, very honestly assessing where we are on this journey. What is holding me back from prema? Why am I where I am on this path? And, that is a very personal question. It's not black and white. There are so many factors to consider. We have a roadmap, a very clear roadmap of the, step-by-step progress of bhakti through shraddha to prema. And, fortunately, we now lots of seminars, wonderful, explanations of, what that is, from beginning to end. And, but it's not so easy to see where we are or others are on that map. It's not, a totally linear process with a timeline that you can exactly calculate for every individual, that after such and such amount of time, you will be at this specific place on the map. The trajectory of each person's journey, it's not fixed. And we see in the lives of devotees, it's not always this, gradual, you start here, gradual elevation, and you're rising through different stages, and you rise through life until you reach the peak. What we see and often what we experience, can be, quite different. It could be, a sudden just rise, followed by a long plateau of stagnation. Or it can be, up and down and highs and lows and zigzagging through life, sometimes flying high and other times stagnating, or even going backwards or straying right off the path. It's not always clear what stage a person is at any given time. And of course, there's a multitude of reasons why our journeys can look so different, despite all of us, following the same process and having the same guidelines to follow. But it might help us to be more generous and understanding with each other if we consider, many of these factors. Like, for one thing, we're just not all starting out at the same place. Past life practice, it's a significant factor. And we see some devotees, they just start out, they're at a very high place, deep understanding and enthusiasm, and they just keep going in that vein. Like they already, graduated from the University of Bhakti, and, whereas you see some of us, maybe we're just starting bhakti in this lifetime. So, we have to start in nursery school level. It's just the way it is, and some of us arrive carrying very heavy baggage of past life, sins and conditioning, heavy samskaras that, might make it so much more difficult to progress than someone else. And we're going through all these different stages of life and astrological periods in which, our practice and our mentality, it might, really change dramatically, and often we might be faced with emotional or physical challenges that, impact our progress favorably or unfavorably. And, sometimes we might feel we have, profound insight. And then at other times it feels like we can't see anything at all. And the Lord is totally hidden from us, So there are many factors that can explain why we see so much diversity, and answering this question that people ask, And of course, the main factor is why we, are where we are, is actually how we're actually living the process. It it may look like we're all doing all the same things, but what's going on inside, it may be very, very different, because we're individuals. We're each on an individual journey, and it's very personal and complex. And until we reach advanced stages of bhakti, there's likely to be many impediments that can hinder our progress. Our conditioned nature, which is driving the machinery of our body and mind, it can still have a powerful pull on us, even if it's just, as we would say, residual karmic effects, that the fan has already been unplugged, but the blades, they can still be turning strongly for a long time. I think it's the third canto, is it, that Srimad Bhagavatam, Kapila Dev, he explains all of this. Really, it's very interesting how, we can still be under the grip of the modes of nature, even when, we're trying to practice bhakti. And he explains what it looks like, that when passion still has a real grip on us, we might be very busy, but still increasing desire for fame or honor or power or influence, might be increasing, And, if the mode of ignorance has a hold on us, we might be getting more critical or lazy or angry or even violent in words or actions, And he describes there's 81 varieties of this kind of mixed devotion that can, slow our progress, or even result in becoming, rather than becoming more loving, we could become more hard-hearted if we're not careful. And, anyone that's been around for a while, we've seen varieties of this in action, and most of us have probably experienced it, to some degree or another. And Lord Kapila Dev, he explains further. It's a very interesting part of the Bhagavatam where he explains the reason why we get stuck in this way is due to what he calls a separatist mentality, meaning that our wishes have not yet come fully in line with the wishes of the Lord. We still see him kind of like the order supplier. And we fluctuate between what I want and what Krishna and the spiritual master wants, a little for Krishna, a lot for me. And, in such a state, naturally enthusiasm fluctuates because the mind is still moving between competing centers of attachment. The conditioned ego, it just can't maintain stable spiritual absorption while simultaneously preserving material self-interest. Therefore, at one moment, mind moves toward bhakti, and at another moment towards, social validation or sensuality or ambition or emotional self-protection, or in so many ways, this oscillation, it produces a state of, unstable bhakti. And there's a lot written about this by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Periods of intensity alternating with periods of weakness, and bhakti itself, it's stable by nature. The unstable element is us, the conditioned ego that resists dissolution. There's that cartoon. There's a little cartoon that says, "We have met the enemy, and it is us." If you ever saw that. So this kind of unstable bhakti, it can go on for a few moments or a few lifetimes, and that's really up to the individual. And, we see some really special devotees who, they're just so active and deeply immersed in service. They just seem to speed through this kind of unstable terrain without even noticing it. Or, maybe they passed through that in a previous life, while others, plod slowly through this kind of dry, bumpy, unstable terrain for a long time, even lifetimes. I hope this doesn't sound too depressing or discouraging. It's not my intention. But I'm just trying to explain why each of us are at different places on the map, even after practicing for a long time. And reflecting like this on where our journey has led us to on the map. It's not meant to discourage, but, to direct us how to proceed. That's the purpose of a map. And, because it's not useful to pretend to be somewhere we are not. We can only take our own honest journey, not someone else's. And, wherever we are on that map, it's all positive. It's everyone walking even a few steps on that path of bhakti is extremely fortunate and is headed in the right direction. So, we just have to keep going. We have a clear map, and we have footsteps of those who have successfully navigated all that terrain. We can follow that, so we can be encouraged wherever we are. But again, we have to be, Shastra warns us again and again to watch out for the most dangerous terrain, which is offenses. to the holy name and to Vaishnavas, those pitfalls that will stop us on the path and perpetuate a state of unstable bhakti. I mean, we know it. We hear about it all the time. We've heard it again and again, but to scrutinize how this happens in our lives, how it must be happening if we don't have prema, it's personal and often can be quite subtle and tricky. Regarding offenses to the holy name, well, Krishnadas Kaviraj Maharaj, he says it so clearly in the Adi Leela. Here's that verse. He says, if one's heart does not change, tears do not flow from his eyes, his body does not shiver, and his bodily hairs do not stand on end as he chants the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it should be understood that his heart is as hard as iron. This is due to his offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord's holy name. Whoa, talk about a painful to read, but very clear. And, fortunately, in recent years now, so many devotees are getting the importance of this, of doing it right, getting it right. And there are so many seminars and so many good instructions now, to help us to do this right. And then, of course, offenses to Vaishnavas. Well, we know it's such a big factor. And to examine in our lives, especially now in this age of anger, when anyone and everyone feels he can just lash out with their opinions and abuses on the internet, it's a very dangerous time. And we know all about it, but still, it's very hard to practice. But these are the things that keep the door to, higher spiritual realms shut tight. And, unfortunately, it's taken me years to see how insidious offenses can be. We might think we're just, making harmless judgment of others, but actually be making offenses, and the tendency can be very subtle, in the way we view others or how we size them up. Even it's not apparently, nasty, but it's judgmental and it's dangerous. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he warns, he said that, through empirical knowledge or external analysis, no one can really recognize the true character of a devotee. And, the position of a Vaishnava, even an aspiring Vaishnava, it's just not determined by whether we like them or not, or by their position in the institution, or their viewpoints, or their skills, or by how many years they've been practicing. It's just entirely understood by the condition of their heart. And to know another person's heart, well, that's Krishna's business. Only he knows that, and he may empower representatives to understand that also, But, again and again in Shastra, we are told that it's very difficult to accurately judge a Vaishnava. Even great devotees have been totally misunderstood. There's Sridhar, the banana seller, where they just thought he is just a, useless, poor guy. Ramananda Roy, Pundarik Vijayanidhi, even Gadadhar Pandit misunderstood Pundarik Vijayanidhi, Jad Bharat, so, and then, there's also the opposite thing. We might think someone is an advanced devotee, and then it turns out not to be. be the opposite. Even, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, he traveled with a friend when he went to Puri, and he thought he was such a great devotee. But when he arrived and introduced him to Mahaprabhu didn't even want to look at him. He could see, no, he's not for real. So, we can be so wrong in our conditioned assessments and making offenses inadvertently. I know I've done it, thinking that, they think somebody's, not particularly advanced or significant. And then, that person leaves their body in some kind of blaze of glorious auspiciousness, and then you hear all about their amazing things that they've done. And, it can be, sad and quite humbling to see how wrong and how off the mark we can be, and how, that can be a barrier for us. Of course, I'm not talking about we can't be without judgment. It's, human nature, and it's natural defense mechanism, and discernment is so absolutely essential, but I'm talking more in terms of the spirit and the mood and the intention of how and why we need to judge others. That's what we should question. And, often it's just a subtle way to build our own selves up. I know this is very hard to stop this. I'm a Virgo, which is critical and analytical by nature. It is not favorable for devotional service. But at least we can temper our judgments, our judging tendency, by reminding ourselves again and again how extremely limited our perceptions are. We can see only what our level of advancement allows. And until we actually see the soul of another, our assessment of anyone or anything is going to be lacking. And that should at least humble us a bit and make us, more hesitant to judge so freely. So to get past, the blockade of offenses on our path, we have to try to scrutinize our thoughts and our habits carefully, because our prejudices, they can run so deep, we might not even be aware of them, So, of course, we can bypass all these obstacles, by complete immersion in service to Guru and Guranga. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he advises that rather than judge on others, we should look to see ourselves. We should look inward rather than outward. And even in that, we can also be way off the mark. What we think we are can still be quite mistaken. Despite years of hearing, we're not this body, we're not American, Russian, black and white, we're pure spirit souls, but we can still see ourselves in this light. And, the fact that we have so many controversies in our society that go on for decades, that are often related to bodily concepts of life, it means that just because we know something, we know it, we do know it theoretically, but it doesn't mean we're actually practicing and fully imbibing it, And then in spiritual life, We may even add on a whole bunch more new varieties of false identifications. I'm a sannyasi, I'm a great preacher, I'm a temple president, or, many, many varieties of subtle things. And that means that the false ego remains intact beneath devotional externals. And consequently, although practicing bhakti, we continue to cultivate worldly identity structures, bodily attachments and psychological ambitions and subtle enjoyment and desire for recognition. And, in many ways, our center of identity can remain fundamentally material. And this causes internal fragmentation. Externally, we participate in bhakti, but internally, we continue to negotiate and relate with the material ego. Our consciousness is divided. We have a problem of divided identity. So, it's our identity needs to be fully restructured from I'm the independent doer to I exist for myself to I belong to Krishna, I exist for his pleasure. And, without this actual identity shift, chronic instability can persist. And Srila Prabhupada explains this. He says, I have this, what he says, this I am, it has to be changed. I am servant of Krishna. In this way, if you educate or transfer the activities of the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego, then at the time of death, you give up this material, subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego, and by your spiritual body, you go back home, back to Godhead. This is called Krishna consciousness movement. Isn't that cool? That's what Prabhupada considers is the movement. So gross body, automatically we give up. Now, we should practice to give up the subtle body. To give up the subtle body, one has to develop love of God. That's Prabhupada's quote. And Kapila Dev says that, that proper practice of bhakti, it dissolves the subtle body without separate effort, just like, fire in the stomach digests all what we eat, But the point being that bhakti doesn't just change our behavior, it's meant to totally reorganize our identity itself until we no longer see ourselves as the owner, enjoyer, or controller, but only as a servant. And then the false ego actually, it loses its nourishment because our consciousness is no longer on self-validation, but on seva. All this I am is removed, and only the core reality remains. I am an eternal servant of Krishna. And that is exactly what we practice to do every morning before beginning puja, because this is the foundational thing. This is what we got to remember every day, every minute. We remind ourselves of our true identity. We start out with this, I say every morning, I really like this, I am by nature an eternal servant of Krishna, but by misfortune, due to being inimical towards him from time immemorial, I've been identifying myself with the body and wandering in the cycle of repeated birth and death, suffering the burning threefold miseries. And now, as a result of some unimaginable good fortune, by the mercy of my spiritual master, I know I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, an infinitesimal spiritual being, completely apart from this gross and subtle body. Over and over, we recite these deep, essential meditations. Naham vibro, na chanarapatir, na pivaisho, na shudro, naham barni, na chagrihapatir, na vanasto, yatirva. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not all these things. And we practice, that's what we're doing. We're practicing letting go of our material identity, layer by layer, to enter into the reality of divine service, as my true self. Kintu prodyan nakila paramananda purnamritabde gopi bharata parakamalayor dasudasanadasa. I am the servant of the servant of the servant. And that's my actual, real identity. And, generally people don't like the idea of being a servant. Das, and das. They want to be master. But, in the spiritual realm, that is the most desirable position. Das, or dasi. It is the highest title to attain. It's higher than, like queen or king or even conqueror of the world. Dasi. It's more exalted than all of these. We use this term so lightly. But it's the greatest blessing to even just want that. And it's the greatest honor and responsibility to be that. Just like when you get a title, like, the head of state or president, it comes with responsibilities. So when we're given this title, Das, it's a responsibility that's entrusted to us to act according to that exalted title, and to be a true Vaishnava. That's what it means. It means to be Das, Anudas. That's the conclusion of all the Shastras, all philosophy, all the Vedas. And, to the degree that we earnestly and honestly desire and try to imbibe that spirit, well, Krishna will reciprocate and he will cleanse our heart of these, the false conceptions. And that is the most important thing that's going on in our life. The only important thing, really. Once we start practicing bhakti, all of our life situations are now designed by the Lord to unburden us of our false identities and attachments. Whatever's getting in the way, Krishna will help to reveal and remove. Whatever we falsely think ourselves to be, whatever we think we own or control, whatever props up our false ego, it's all gotta go. And how the Lord does that? It's very personal. It's like peeling an onion. The Lord strips away layers of more and more subtle conditioning. He, through guru and devotees and life situations, will expose us and disrobe us in a multitude of ways. It's interesting that many devotees, when they talk about, being in front of Prabhupada, they had that feeling of being naked and, nowhere to hide, totally exposed, So, that Krishna's doing that and his devotees do that. If I think I'm a great leader, well, maybe my project's going to totally fail. Or if I think I'm an important person in the movement, some young person will come up and take over. And if I think I'm strong and healthy, I might wind up with a debilitating disease, Well, old age itself is certainly designed to do a lot of this work. Or if I have negative illusions of myself, oh, I'm useless, I'm unlovable, But Krishna might, empower us instead, give us unexpected, elevated service, or he'll send people into our life that uplift us or challenge us, and he'll push us and pull us in so many different ways just to help us let go of the superficial. And that is our good fortune, that Krishna is purifying our heart according to our sincerity and his independent will. It's an ongoing action. And, every round we chant and every act of service we, rendered, it allows him to remove a bit more of the dust from our heart, because he's urging us to prepare for death when nothing can prop us up. We're alone, and all that matters is the condition of the heart. How much affection is there for the Lord and the devotees. That's all. That's all the Lord cares about. And that's what's going to carry us to our next destination. And, as we get older, this reality, it becomes really more urgently apparent, So our task, just have to have a drink. Our task is just to try to see Krishna's hand in our life in every situation we encounter. What is Krishna doing to me? What is he showing me? What am I meant to learn? And these are really the only important questions in our life. And, it's going to look different for different devotees, And in this way, although maybe we don't see Krishna directly, but we can definitely see his hand. And his hand, well, that's part of his body. So we can see that. And whatever situation we find ourselves, whether it's glorious or embarrassing or empowering or disempowering, we know that Krishna is trying to bring each of us to the point of Trinad api sunichena. It's the whole point of it all, until a genuine state of humility arises. The door to all those glorious higher realms of experience and emotions that Srila Rupa Goswami describes, it remains closed. And no amount of banging on the door is going to open it. Only when the Lord and his devotees are pleased with our humble attitude will the door open. We are utterly dependent on their mercy. And that's actually very, very encouraging, because if we examine the nature of the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and his devotees, that will give us a lot of hope. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the most special, most merciful incarnation. Namo Mahavananaya. He's giving out mercy in a way that's never been seen before. He's giving prema even to the most unqualified, even to animals. When he was traveling through Jarikanda forest, he made tigers and elephants and deer chant and dance. And they were so overwhelmed with love, they started embracing and kissing each other. And when Lord Chaitanya, he splashed water on some elephants, and they squealed with ecstasy, and some of them were fainting. Imagine Bhattacharya is watching all this. Just imagine what he saw. And Lord Chaitanya just smiled to see all this fun, So, the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is inconceivable. And Srila Prabhupada explained it like this. He said, this is a quote from Prabhupada, he said, to understand Krishna, is very, very difficult job. And yet, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not only giving Krishna, but giving Krishna prema, this most intimate relationship. So, to become under the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu means you have got Krishna. So that's a very encouraging statement. And even more encouraging is to understand that the mercy of Lord Chaitanya's devotees is even greater than that. There's a really long and beautiful conversation between Lord Narayan and Durvasa Muni that illustrates this. I think it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. They're speaking it, and at one point the Lord stops, and he's considering whether to tell Durvasa Muni, a deep and intimate truth about his love for his devotees. So he went ahead and he said, although the mercy in the hearts of the devotees is the same as my mercy, but it's also different. It is also their mercy. And the difference between the two is that my mercy follows the mercy of my devotees. Thus, those who would not have been eligible for my mercy directly receive the same mercy through the mercy of my devotees. Because great devotees help to increase my spiritual family in this way, I am eternally in their debt. I cannot repay them. Na paraya aham. And the Lord stopped speaking again, and Durvasa saw the tears in his lotus eyes, and he was touched, and he was like, my Lord, why are you crying? And the Lord was choked up. He couldn't immediately answer. His mind was sinking into the lake of attachment to his devotees, where, it became like a swan playing among the lotus stems of the different attributes of different devotees. And then he was thinking of Prahlad, and finally he explained to Durvasa how, a devotee will risk his own life to help others. And, in this way he was revealing to Durvasa the heart of a Vaishnava. And he went on to say, he said, a pure devotee thinks primarily of others, not himself. He doesn't care for his own liberation, but always thinks of bringing lost souls back to me. Now, can you understand how much I love them? And why I cannot enjoy my kingdom without them? And why they control me? Sadhavo Hridayam Mayam, the saints are my heart. So just so beautiful. And Lord Chaitanya, he reveals this also in so many pastimes, that anyone who is even loosely connected to one of his dear devotees will surely be a recipient of his mercy. He was expressing his love for Srivas Pandit, and he said that, even a dog in your house will be liberated. And, so that's the great transformational power of even the slightest connection with a pure devotee. And that is where our great hope lies. Because we are like the dogs in Srila Prabhupada's house. So surely the mercy will fall on this. And we've seen this happen how extraordinary mercy, flowing out from Srila Prabhupada could make even the most fallen, feel spiritual emotions and dance. There was at that famous mantra rock dance in San Francisco. When Srila Prabhupada came in, his overwhelming spiritual presence just stunned everyone. And so when the devotees bowed down, everyone bowed down, even the Hells Angels. And, as these like burly bikers bowed, their heavy chains and knives and clubs fell out and crashed onto the wooden floor. And, everyone was struck, by the power of that moment, that even the tough armed motorcyclists were, humbled by Srila Prabhupada's magnanimous presence. He could make animal-like people dance in the same way as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did in the jungle. And Srila Prabhupada also, he just smiled to see it all happen. There's so many examples of what were really not ordinary experiences. There was another really famous one at Ohio State University where, there was over 2,000 students were, packed in the auditorium. And when the chanting began, the students, they just started leaping from their seats to dance and jumping up on the armrests of the theater seats. And it was such a spontaneous celebration that it shocked even Allen Ginsberg, who said he'd never seen so many students, just burst out of their skins with joy. And Srila Prabhupada, he was actively joining in, jumping up and down and throwing flower garlands into the crowd, because there's just nothing Srila Prabhupada enjoys more than seeing others touched by Krishna consciousness. He never asked for instant perfection. He just appreciated even the smallest attempt to serve. There's an example of that. I don't know if it was New York or San Francisco, some drunken bum came in with some toilet paper, and, Prabhupada said, "Oh, very nice, very nice. He's begun his service," And, recently I heard also a touching story from my godbrother, Smarhari. He was in Prabhupada's room when a devotee came in and told Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, every time I think I'm making an advancement, I have a fall down. And this has happened to me so many times that I just don't know if I can find the strength to pick myself up again. And to Smara's surprise, Srila Prabhupada laid back on his cushion with his head facing the ceiling, and he just rippled with laughter. He said it was like a whole body laugh, like a young boy, and it seemed to just go on for 2 or 3 minutes. And then Srila Prabhupada brought his head back down, the nice fatherly smile, and said, just as an infant, when learning to walk, falls down so many times, he picks himself up and he persists and he learns to walk. And after some time, he can run. He can jump, and he can do so many wonderful athletic things. But do not think you're a big advanced devotee when you are still an infant in spiritual life. So, to have contact with Srila Prabhupada in any way, it means that immense mercy is available to us. He said, "My mercy is equally available to all." He also said, "Qualified or unqualified, I love you." So how can we be discouraged? However far from the goal we might feel we are, there's every reason to believe that we will arrive at the destination, however long it may take. There's a story of the great devotee Mukunda, who he made some apparent offense, and Lord Chaitanya said, you're not going to see me for another 1,000,000 years. And rather than being despondent, Mukunda started to dance in ecstasy. He said, I will see, I will see. Lord Chaitanya was very pleased. And I mean, we do hope that it's not going to be 1,000,000 lifetimes. But it is a fact that Srila Prabhupada has promised we will see, and it will happen. And some devotees already see, others will probably see very soon, and some of us it will take time. But, we've already seen many devotees depart this world in the most extraordinary ways, who have, undoubtedly reached perfection of life. And that's possible for all of us, if we remain. And I recently read a nice quote, which I copied down. Madhavananda put it up, and I'm not sure who he was quoting, but he's always very authoritative. And he explained that a seed will stay unnoticed in the ground for a long time, sometimes for many years, seemingly not doing anything. And it might even look like apparent failure. Yet, he further explains that the period we are in now of Mahaprabhu's movement, this is that time of the seeds germinating and beginning to sprout. And he is confident, as are our acharyas and contemporary saintly persons, that prema will manifest in time. So these are more very encouraging words. So to me, it's just time separating us, and it's not something we can figure out exactly, when and if Guru and Gauranga want us to experience deeper spiritual emotions, then that will come. I am very sorry that this talk has become so long and maybe a bit boring. There's not a lot of nectar. I talked a lot about, what blocks us on the path. But, this is my life experience. We need to see the roadblocks and expect challenges. But there's also so much mercy available to help us reach the lotus feet of Guru and Gauranga. And there are, many remarkable, enthusiastic, empowered, and unstoppable devotees who are examples of how beautifully the process works when it's applied properly and consistently. So, personally, I'm still in the unstable bhakti stage, but I can say that I have had ecstatic experiences that were so wonderful that even if they lasted only a few moments, and even if they were just, like shadow reflections of real spiritual emotions, those moments are the lived experiences that totally confirm everything I've heard, from our acharyas. So those moments, they've made my life totally worthwhile. So although, my spiritual life hasn't, skyrocketed yet, but, for the most part, I really am overcome with the deepest and most overwhelming feeling of immense gratitude for all that we've been given. To me, it's just beyond miraculous that some little nobody kid from Detroit City has been shown what the perfection of life is and the process for reaching it. Something that even very great sages and demigods don't really comprehend. And that's just inconceivable to me, So any difficulties, delays, challenges, disappointments that come as we walk the path, it just seems like, a pittance, just nothing, a tiny, tiny price to pay for the gift of a purposeful life of devotional service, for the gift of the holy name and the association devotees and the gift of Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita and living in the Dham. It's miraculous, And I know there's a lot lacking in me. And, I may doubt myself sometimes, but I don't doubt Srila Prabhupada and the path chalked out by our acharyas. I haven't been a great disciple, but I know that my future is in Srila Prabhupada's hands, and wherever he wants to place me, that's where I want to be. So the future is bright, even, I don't know, I might still have to travel through some dark places to get there. But one time in Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada said, all of you were simply born because the mission was to be started. Just like the Yadu Vamsa, Krishna ordered all the devotee demigods to go and take birth there to help me. Similarly, you also, you were born in Europe, America, to help me. Now, of course, this statement, it's a statement of Srila Prabhupada's extreme humility. We certainly cannot be compared to the Yadu Vamsa. But this is Srila Prabhupada expressing his mood of gratitude for, whatever little we have done, and that is his kindness. And another time Srila Prabhupada said, I called out and you came. And somehow, we heard Prabhupada's call through the thick blanket of darkness we were living in. And what were the chances of that? From a cosmic perspective, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears once in one day of Brahma, which is like over 8 billion years. And then Srila Prabhupada appears less than a second later. And then in that same minuscule cosmic sliver in time, a few souls appeared to assist him. And that's all of us. First, second, third, fourth generations. Out of all the unlimited conditioned souls in the universes, a few souls were drawn to this special honor of serving Srila Prabhupada and Mahaprabhu's mission. So how uniquely fortunate is every one of us, all devotees. Some of the souls who answered the call are, swimming in the deepest nectar of devotional service, and others, even very senior devotees with decades of steady service and sadhana, still struggle in various ways in their twilight years. And other younger devotees, maybe they haven't manifested their contribution yet. But what we all share that is, is an extraordinary connection with Srila Prabhupada and thus our previous acharyas. And this mercy will never leave us. So if we can try to see each other in this light, maybe we can be more generous with each other, show more mercy to each other, because every one of us is just unbelievably fortunate, So, my hope is just to stay in the company of genuine devotees and to participate in Mahaprabhu's mission in whatever way Srila Prabhupada allows. And I realize I have really kind of gone off on a tangent and taken a very long, winding route to answer the initial simple questions. How do I feel now after so many years practicing bhakti? Have my expectations been met? And, I'll just conclude with the simple answer: yes, a resounding yes. Yeah, so I'll end there. I said I would also talk about the evolution of the institution, but obviously this has gone way too long for that. That will have to be another talk. So thank you for listening. Hare Krishna.